Okay, I wanted to talk about this because it's an important point about where Georgia's at and where they're going. And on Monday, Kirby Smart was talking about his offensive line and wanting to. There's a lot that he said, but he essentially wants things to get better, needless to say. And here's the direct quote from him. He said, "We really didn't play well up front," and he said that after the game as well. And he said, he said they, but he said Missouri had a lot of momentum. We've got to do a better job of preparing our guys, but we also have to do a better job in game of making good decisions and putting ourselves in a situation to be successful or more successful at least. And for all of the online discussion this time a week ago about how Georgia would be motivated, Georgia would be ready to play against Kent State or after the Kent State game, and how that was a little bit sloppy at times. That was mainly about turnovers. This was not about turnovers, although the two turnovers were a major problem. The issue here was getting beat up front by a Missouri team that they can sometimes run some stuff that leads to total disaster or total uh, uh, failure on their part, but they kept in the game the entire time because they kept making plays and make it frustrating for Georgia. And when they ripped off a big run, Georgia, when Kendall Milton got loose, he had a fumble, or Georgia's sitting there at midfield, probably in control of the game at that point. So uh, the bulk of the game, the bulk of the first half, Georgia was just not doing a very good job. Again, he said, this is another thing. He was talking about gap plays. He says, we run gap plays in every game. If you look at the game, you see where we have. He says, you see where we have. He says, everybody does. Nobody plays football anymore with just one run. There's a lot of multiple runs out there. You can have so many runs that you can't run them all. Um, the idea is to have the right ones and execute them well. And that's they did not execute in the first half. And that was a lot of what happened. Is twofold for Georgia. Number one, Missouri outplayed them. I mean, that's just what it was. I don't know about the whole game, but certainly in the first half. In the second in the second half, when you look at what was going on, I think I've chronicled this a few times. Georgia just really took it to Missouri, and that was an adjustment, I think, on Georgia's part. But just generally speaking, they got after it more. It was an adjustment, yes, but that was, that was something that Georgia had to do, or they would have lost that game. Now, they pretty well almost ran out of time, but by the second half, they really took over, and it was a lot of recognizing, hey, what we're wanting to do, what we're trying to do, it's not working. So let's adjust, and that's an important part of sports. Needless to say, make sure you're picking up Dogstruction. The link is down below. If you want me to autograph it for y'all, remember the forward is from Foxworthy, the famous comedian and Georgia fan. He was nice enough to take time to write a very lengthy thing about his grandfather and so forth and his journey with the Dogs. And this game, with Mizzou, the thing to remember about sports is that the Oregon game doesn't help you now, and the Missouri game doesn't help Auburn. It's just where we're at. And how well do you play in that moment? That's the question. How good a job are you going to do getting it done at the time you got to get it done? And unfortunately for Georgia, they were down. I cannot remember the score at the half. They were down 16-6 at the half. And in the second half, they scored a field goal, touchdown, and touchdown. Well, it almost got too late, right? But it was about, I thought the defense played well. But moving forward, this is about the offensive line not just gelling, but performing. You know, the finger pointing from fans right now is pointing at the offensive line. But this is correctable. All this is correctable. I mean, it would be sort of like saying, in 2017, Georgia lost to Auburn down there in a momentum game. No question, that was a momentum game. And therefore they're in trouble. or therefore they cannot win the national championship. Well, that's none of those things are true. I mean, it's pretty evident those things were not true. This is about getting it right. This is about a mindset. Um, I hesitate to say this, but that may have been the best chance to get Georgia this season because, and I said the Mississippi State game might be too, but from here on out, Georgia's going to certainly have the attention of Auburn, I would imagine. I need to be proven correct about that. Vanderbilt, maybe not, but I do not. Vanderbilt does not have the players that Missouri does, that's for sure, and it's not on the road. Florida, Florida, Georgia better be awake for that one. I would imagine they will be. And then you've got that stretch of tough games. I mean, everybody's going to be well paid attention to Tennessee, no doubt. Mississippi State's the one I think to be a little bit concerned about because it's on the road. Mississippi State's got players. They may have a couple losses, but they can beat Georgia. Okay, Tennessee can beat Georgia. Florida can beat Georgia. Kentucky, the week after that, they can beat Georgia. We're not at a point here where Georgia can't lose, and I think that's the thing that they didn't flip a switch. They started playing better. I mean, the whole first half was not a disaster. They just were not crisp. Okay, and people want to freak out because they were not as crisp as you wanted them to be against Kent State. Well, Alabama was not crisp against Texas, right? And now all of a sudden they've had a couple of wins. Everything's cool, right? Everything's cool. Now they still got the same issues. Georgia will have the same issues in the future too if they don't play with the urgency necessary to win in this league. A lot of playing in this league is about mindset, is about your willingness to do things. And that's why Georgia more often than not wins, because trying to become a starter on this team means you got to do a lot of stuff to beat other people out. I mean, let's just say as an example, Xavier Truss. I mean, Xavier Truss is having to beat out former, starter Warren McClendon. Why is Broderick Jones starting? Well, he's having to beat out a guy, and same thing with Warren McClendon. They're having to beat out. Sometimes I forget names. It's easy for y'all to sit there and think of them immediately, but you're beating out Mims. Okay, Mims, who is playing plenty. That's why typically Georgia gets the job done, is because there's so much competition at any given moment that the cream rises to the top. But in any sport at any time, you can lose. Talk to the Patriots about that, right? Talk to Alabama in 16. Well, Alabama in 16 and 18. I mean, that's a Clemson team that probably should have lost twice and only lost once. And then they played a really good game against Alabama and won the national championship. So I think a lot of people are confusing Georgia's performance with a loss. It's not a loss. Okay, they won that game. I can't remember where the game ended, but they ended at, where did they end the game? I'll have to go to it, but they were driving on Mizzou at the end of the game too. Let's not forget that either. They got to the 32-yard line. So let's just say Georgia needed to kick a field goal to win there. I mean, could Jack kick a 38-yarder to win it? I mean, looked like it to me. Okay, could he have kicked it to win by 7? Yeah, well, you would never do that. You're just taking knees, right? So the moral of the story here is, A, play better. Come with an attitude that you will strike someone. I mean, this is not an easy sport, y'all. I mean, the bulk of people who are watching this, including me who's talking about, I did not play in the SEC. That did not happen, okay? I went out there hitting guys, okay? I get that. I understand that. To prepare yourself for a 12-game regular season where you are confronting someone my size or larger who has often come at you at significant speeds faster than I can run. I do not run like Brock Bowers. I do not glide like Darnell. It is about mindset. One of my closest friends in life is a former Georgia football player. I'm not going to talk about who it is. I have several very close friends who are former players. The truth is, man, it's not an easy sport. Like, you get tired. The problem is you don't have that margin of error. This Georgia team doesn't have that. They are not last year's team. They're not as good as last year's team is as a team. Okay? They're not. And and by the way, that's okay. There's a million different ways to do things. The way Urban Meyer won the national championship at Florida is different than the way that Nick Saban won it at Alabama. Is different than the way that Dabo won it at Clemson. Is different than the way that Ed Orgeron won it at LSU. Is also different than the way that Kirby did it. The way that Kirby did it a season ago was the national folks and all of you thought, oh, you can't win it by playing defense. Okay. They did. They did. They were out here ragdolling Bryce Young. That's not who they are right now. They're going to have to win the way they can win. I think the important part about this is they adjusted, the whole team. Kirby, who is a very good adjuster, by the way, and then just the kids, the players. If you watch the second half was not at all like the first half, period. Now, I think if you're Georgia and you had a 20-6 lead at the half and you only won the game by 4, then people would be freaking out about, they came back on them and all this stuff. I mean, whatever. I mean, I think if you got a 20-6, Missouri's not sticking around for that game. You got to come out fast and furious. And it sounds like a bunch of excuse making. It's not. Excuses are not excuses all the time. Okay. Missouri was ready to go. The crowd was ready to go. But Georgia has to understand that when they go to Mississippi State, when they play the Gators on the road, and when they go to Kentucky, that those places are going to be hostile. And you got to prepare yourself for those moments. And the kids were not ready to play fast and furious and strike, folks. They got beat on the line. Okay? So that's the problem. And that is a correctable problem. Now, I've seen teams change and just get rolling. Did Alabama do that after the Texas game? I don't know. Did Clemson just do that? I mean, everybody was ready to sell Clemson down the river a week ago, and now everybody's got them in their top 5. I guess they were always in the top 5, but there were plenty of doubts. We don't have doubts about Clemson now? Like, we're cool with Michigan? You got to win when you got to win. You got to play. You got to play the way you need to play in that moment to win. The way I always say it, you got to hit backhands. If you can't hit backhands, you ain't gonna win. And Georgia did that the other night.